Greetings, one and all. This is Real World Branding. I'm Bill Gullen, president of Finch Brands, a premier boutique brand consultancy. Thank you for joining us. And today I have the distinct honor and pleasure of bringing John Ferreira, Chief Insights Officer, and Tim DeGennaro, VP of Insights Communities, aboard for a focused conversation that is, we know, for insights leaders, which is a portion of our relationship base, a pretty interesting time. It's budget season for companies that are at least on a fiscal, and even on a January fiscal, and even those who may not be. There is perhaps a planning orientation as we enter into late Q3 and begin that final home stretch of the year. And we're focusing pretty narrowly today on a topic that we hear for this group is of great import, which is for those who have insights communities in play. First of all, how do you know whether they're working hard enough for you? And then secondly, for those organizations who may suspect that they're not, but find the thought of having to switch or switching to be exhausting, which leaves them in a status quo that is imperfect. How can we alleviate some of those concerns? And so John and Tim are going to address those 2 points directly. And I really enjoy speaking with both of them and their cherished colleagues. And I know you'll enjoy hearing from John Ferreira and Tim DeGennaro. Joined today on Real World Branding by two of my favorite colleagues. I say that to all of them, but these guys are terrific colleagues and friends. John Ferreira, who's our Chief Insights Officer, and Tim DeGennaro, who's our VP of Insights Communities. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
It's a great, distinct pleasure, Tim. But our topic today is, it's that time of year where, for those who are on a calendar fiscal, they're in budgeting and thinking through what's working, what isn't. And I think the conversation here is geared towards folks, and I know there's many of them, we talk to them all the time, who have insights communities in play, though A, they may not feel like it's activating its full potential, and B, they wonder about, if they were to switch, are they just opening up a process that's exhausting and more trouble than it's worth? And so we are here to address that. John and Tim you've both been through a lot of switches, and you've also, at least in your case, John, been on the client side thinking through how to make sure that you have the greatest return on insights. And so why don't we start? What are some signs that your insights community may not be working hard enough for you?
Yeah, I would say even like one step before that in terms of why this matters and why it's important. Yeah. It's really never been more important than it is today to have a complete and cutting edge insights capabilities.
Yes.
With the pace of technological change disrupting almost every industry and companies needing to be closer to consumers and customers that are changing faster than ever because their lives are being affected by all this technology as well. It's not just business, but it's the underlying trends and markets that are changing. Having a really reliable, scalable, rapid fire, agile, interconnected insights capabilities to get close to the consumer and the customer and stay close to the consumer and the customer so you can follow the changes as they unfold. It's never been more important than it is today. And if you don't have that, you're probably setting yourself up to fall behind the competition.
Certainly at a disadvantage, yes.
And insights communities are one really valuable tool to be able to do that, especially if you set it up in the right way, with the right scale and the right audience. You have the right partner and you have the right technology. So really one of the reasons our Finch site offering was born, as you mentioned, was we saw that performance was shorting of promise. And there are lots of reasons why. It can be team-related factors of your team not really getting your brands or your business and being able to deliver that high impact research with high impact ideas that will impact the business in big ways. Or they may be more in sort of an order taking mode versus really leading the insights conversation and collaborating to help you get the most out of creative insights methodologies. In some cases, I experienced team continuity of it was a constant rotating door of people on my accounts, which was then interconnected to a lack of expertise around my brands and my businesses. At times they weren't always responsive, and part of that is, you'd be surprised how many different accounts sometimes leading insights communities providers can staff their team across. So never really felt like I got the level of focus. And then from a technology standpoint, when I was at Campbell Soup, it was a tiny community. It was 500 people. We couldn't do really sophisticated or credible quantitative research, which for many executive audiences, you could do the research, but it didn't really land because it was tiny sample sizes. The tools were kind of falling behind, and just on the whole, it felt like each year that we stood still with the status quo, we were kind of falling behind a little bit. So we designed FinchSight to address all those different pain points. And each year that I was there, we kind of talked ourselves out of change, because change feels big, change feels scary, change feels like it's more than you might be able to handle, especially in general, and thinking about changing your insights community where the status quo is the easy decision. But looking back, we left something on the table by not upgrading and not being able to find the right partner, I guess, to be able to answer and address some of those pain points in a way that we were confident.
Yeah, so let's summarize a couple of these things. That you may need to seek something new if some of the things you mentioned, John, and when you say team in this case, you mean the team of the supplier.
Yep.
If there was a revolving door of people and you're deprived of the continuity that is required to really get it, that's one. Another sounds like if the size and structure of the community limits you methodologically. Another sounds like if the internal reaction to research is a polite smile rather than something greater, and a connection of insights to action. And if you sense some degree of lethargy or exhaustion amongst your stakeholders, your colleague stakeholders, in terms of the power of insights. Are there a couple of you had a long and very substantive answer, but are there a couple of conditions that an insights lead may be able to identify as being indicative of a need to think differently?
I mean, one of the biggest signs is if your community is losing credibility internally, and that can be a slip slide over time, but you're not getting the same level of executive attention with brand leadership or insights leadership. Maybe you're presenting a certain set of data, insights, and recommendations, and they don't take your echoes, and they just decide to go with their gut instead.
Yeah.
These are things that can happen within insights and research in general, but if they're happening with any sort of frequency, that's definitely sort of the thermometer there, I think, for whether you need change. And overall, just if you're leading the community, your overall sense of satisfaction or frustration, is your partner really delivering for you? Are they bringing that eye-to-eye, peer-to-peer level intelligent conversation, bringing the fresh ideas, helping you go further faster, or is it a grind? And are they not bringing the thinking or not helping you move fast enough? I like to say agile is fragile if you don't have the right team in place or the technology to pull it off. And having the tech's not enough.
Yes.
You need the team that knows how to use it.
No doubt. Tim, let's bring you in, because there's other things that we've heard, horror stories from clients, particularly about the community itself. John's highlighted a number of externalities that ultimately relate to community impact. Within the community, I know that we take engagement, for example, very seriously, and sometimes communities die on the vine simply because members are disengaged. Are there signs of an unhealthy or unproductive community that we can diagnose?
Yeah, I think number one, so a lot of it ties back to technology and how easy you're making it for your members to be part of your community.
Yeah.
So I know from some past history, we used to have to ask our community members every single survey if they were a male, a female, what was their household income, and
Right.
we'd get complaints all the time from community members of like, how do you not know that? And that is a good question. How did we not know that? And when the technology doesn't keep up with the sort of ease of use that not only the members in the community expect, but also the delivers of the community offering expect, and their clients of how come we couldn't, do a survey where half the survey went to people within this income bracket and the other half went to that survey without asking them their income all over again every time. That kind of thing, if we haven't caught up with the way we can now do very rich profiling with our members so that we don't have to annoy them with these constant questions, can really drive engagement down, as well as the ability to have a variety of types of activities within the communities. People don't want to take 20-minute surveys all the time. They don't even want to take 5-minute surveys all the time. They want a break. They want to be sent to a store. They want to get on camera. They want to draw. So having those kinds of capabilities in a community to offer people more interesting ways of expressing themselves and their really amazing ideas is another sign. If those things are not built in and part of the community and easy to deploy and easy for the member to take part in, you're going to see engagement and the learnings that you get from those community members suffer.
Right. And both of those are great examples that seem to spring on one hand from limitations of technology, other suppliers' limitations of technology, and also other suppliers' limitations on imagination.
Right.
when it comes to methodologies that not only yield really interesting learnings, breakthrough learnings, but also engage members in the process.
Yep.
So, all right, hopefully listeners are not seeing themselves in this, although I guess there's opportunity for us if they are, but hopefully for their sake, these are not conditions that they're observing, but let's say they are. And John, as you said, you were early in your career, kind of just like, it's not perfect, but just exhausting to even think about switching. It'll be hard. Something won't work. Probably isn't actually that hard, is it? Because we've done a lot of it. So, and any guidance you can provide on, it's easier than you think.
Yeah, just kind of to start that thought off. Status quo is the easy choice, and it may seem like changing is going to be a lot of work or it's a risk. But in fact, the bigger risk, if you feel and know in your gut that your community and your partner are not delivering at the level that you need, is to do the status quo and stand still. It's a risk to your brands and the businesses behind them. It's even a risk to your personal brand. Having been on the client side, I know that the insights leaders at whatever levels of the organization, as they continue to work up the ladder, are the ones that send strong signals that they're staying on the cutting edge. They're upgrading the capabilities. The team more than likely is smaller than it was last year because things need to get more efficient. The budgets might be smaller, but how do you find those upgrades and show that you're getting leadership closer to the consumer and the customer than ever? The bigger risk is actually standing still from my point of view, and even the act of upgrading and doing an internal round of listening with brand leaders and sort of doing a roadshow on here are the new capabilities and here are new ways we're going to be able to answer questions you've had for a while. Here's a new team that's going to bring a higher level of strategic thinking into the equation to help us solve our problems. And creating that dialogue is a commercial for your internal insights team and showing that you are progressive, you're making waves, and you're going to make a bigger impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So are there, Tim, certain techniques that we've employed around transition that make it not painless, that make it high potential? What are some of the rudiments that are required to make a switch work and make it positive? And I mean, it's not just about the procurement and legal contracting hell, but I mean, in terms of the workflow, what are some things that we can do to make it better?
Well, I think you start by making it clear what's going to happen. And I think both to your community members, but also just to yourself. And I think that's the biggest barrier. The most scary part is that a lot of clients that we've had have never been inside of the community that they are transitioning. They don't know how it works from a technical standpoint. And now they are fearful that they're going to be asked to be technical experts. And the truth is, it's not that. It's very simple. And any partner worth their salt will be part of those conversations with both your team as well as your existing community partner. We can talk. I think the other is that, the first time I did a transition, I thought that it was going to be this incredibly complicated transfer of data, and there was going to be some special button that members needed to push to go from one community to another, and it really is not that. And once I realized how simple it is, it made things so much easier as a deliverer, which is all it is. It's like importing contacts. If you were to go sign into Gmail for the first time, it's going to ask you, do you want to import your contacts from Outlook? Right. And you say yes. And it does that. And it brings in an email address. It brings in a name. It brings in some notes you may have about this person. That's all we're doing. Right. We're taking a list from one database and putting it in ours. And it's that simple. I mean, of course, there's some transfers of information and things like that. But at the end of the day, that's really all it is. It's pretty simple. I think communicating to your members ahead of time what is going to happen and when it's going to happen is key. And that's something that you might start a month in advance with your members, and you want to explain to them that in this new environment, there's going to be new opportunities to participate, more ways to earn if you're doing points or sweepstakes or things like that, more ways for your voice to be heard. And there's a big fear, too, that those engaged members are no longer going to be engaged in the new community. But the reality is anyone who was engaged to begin with, vast majority of them stay engaged.
Right. So those who are worried about the wasted investment in recruiting and engagement should maybe worry a little less about that. Our track record suggests that productive members port over at very high percentages.
Right.
If it's well managed.
Okay. Yep.
So those are some good functional and technical myth busting items. John, you've said from the beginning, John, the importance of team. What about the insights person who feels like, God, I've invested a lot in the team, meaning the supplier team that I work with? How could someone new get it quickly enough to add value to the business? It feels like starting over. It feels like wasted motion. What would you say? Are there certain things that we do at Finch that are designed to really quickly immerse in the learning objectives of our clients and to get up to speed quickly?
Yeah. Well, even in just the process, even before signing contracts, we look to understand their brands and businesses as deeply as possible. We provide examples of, hey, give us real world examples of questions that you're trying to answer. And we give them, okay, here's exactly how we would go about tackling that in a community context, in particular, quantitatively, qualitatively. Here's a 3-part multi-phase learning plan for how we would go about addressing that. And then once we get started and decide to partner together, we do a full download of important strategic decks, annual operating plans, lessons learned, key historical research studies, pretty quick on the uptake. So there's sort of a study hall step for us to be able to get smart in the business quickly. We have a discovery kickoff meeting with the client, which is often, we're told, very helpful to clients to clarify their own strategy and taking the brands and thinking about it from a period of time in the future, looking back and we call it a future cast. Imagine there's a story being written by the brand. What's about the brand? What's the headline? Where is this appearing? What are the supporting points that tell the story and how it unfolds? We unpack key business questions of the moment, as well as key hypotheses for different brands that need to be addressed. Oftentimes, for a large company, there can be a little bit of a listening tour cross-functionally to get all the questions that people have out. And we take all this fuel, we create a baseline learning plan, And then that's a living, breathing thing, week to week, week in, week out, with our teams, keeping track of all the studies that are prioritized, as well as ones that are kind of in the bullpen for when we want to get those into the mix. And that plan is constantly being reworked. And then typically we'll have quarterly check-ins with whatever leadership stakeholders make sense to keep them informed on all the things we've studied. Creative studies, the impact that the studies have had on brands, and then download what are the latest questions on their minds to be able to inform and refine the next 3 months and what that can look like. Because it is business is a living, breathing thing. Companies are living, breathing things, and your learning plan needs to act accordingly. So trying to get out of that the week to week whack-a-mole and take a macro level and a micro level view to keep everything current.
You mentioned the listening tour. I know one of the things, because I really enjoy this part of the process and being involved in it. You referenced earlier the fact that internal insights teams, either individuals or departments, may find their brand tarnished a little bit by communities that haven't kept up. That listening tour not only helps us download really important information and business objectives from key stakeholders, to some degree, it also serves, I think, to energize the departmental and or personal brand of insights leads, because it creates executive relationships for us that are positive and that provide some momentum and a sense of progress and energy, I would think, around the community offering.
Without a doubt. It definitely, we see it consistently energizes the network of stakeholders, brand leadership, other functional leaders, and Finch Brands can be as front of stage or back of stage as needed, kind of in the spotlight where our clients need it, or sort of the supporting actor with helping our insights partners shine all throughout the process.
Excellent. Why don't we leave it there? I know you guys need to run, and I know that both of you have applied some thinking to a couple of printed assets that cover these topics. I think there's one that we're working on, maybe will be published by the time this goes live, about signs that the community may not be as productive as it could be or as progressive as it could be. And then the other one is about some of the key elements in a transition and how they are managed and how the overall transition can be positive as opposed to exhausting, hopeful as opposed to concerning, all of those things. So John and Tim, as always, thank you for your time and your insight.
Great to be here.
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Have a good day, guys. Many thanks, as always, to John and Tim for their insight. They've both been around the block, so to speak, on this. John mentioned his experience as a consumer of insights communities while at Campbell Soup. Tim has been a pioneer in the community space for probably about a decade now. And hopefully they've allayed any fears that one might have about how difficult it may be to transition, if that is in fact the right thing for our insights contacts. So hope you've enjoyed this. And if you have, there's a multiplicity of ways to support us. First of all, if this content touches you because it connects with something that you're thinking or feeling in the moment, and you'd like to talk further about this informally as a friend, or more formally to see what Finch might be able to do to help you progress, please reach out to me at Bill Gullen or bgullen@finchbrands.com. But in terms of the podcast, 3 ways to support us: click subscribe in the podcast app of your choice. Make sure you do not miss a single episode. Rate and review within the same app to help others find us. And keep the dialogue going more generally on Twitter at Bill Gullen. Thoughts, ideas, critiques too, anything that's on your mind. We want this to be valuable to our audience, and we're grateful for your time that you spend with us when we put one of these into the ether. So we'll sign off from the cradle of liberty.